A massive thanks to MPB for sponsoring today's video.
So I received this small package in the post a couple of days ago now, and a lot of you may remember 2 or 3 weeks ago down in South Wales, I lost my remote shutter on the beach. I do not understand that design. And this very, very kind gentleman that goes by the name of Simon has sent me a replacement remote shutter. And he's even wrote a little message on the front of the parcel. Henry, here's your dinner. Best wishes and continued success with the channel. Simon. What an absolute gaffer. Thank you so much, mate. We have got a remote shutter once again. Now, as grateful as I am for the remote shutter, I don't think I'm going to be using it on this evening's adventure. I just don't see myself doing any long exposure photography. We're hiking up a really small-ish Wainwright called Great Cars, and the conditions are looking fantastic for sunset, and that's exactly what we're going to shoot. So I've spent a little bit of time this week trying to think of a video concept that I could come up with to try and help out some beginner photographers. And what I thought was, what if I could transport myself back to day one, to the first day that I got a camera back in Vancouver in Canada? What would I focus all of my attention on right from the offset? Now that I've had a good several years worth of experience behind me, I'd like to think I know what's important for my own photography at least. And there's one thing that came straight to my mind, and I don't know why, but I just think it might surprise you a little bit. So of course, when I sat down to try and answer this question, a lot of the obvious things popped into my head as well. Composition, the understanding of subject and light, trying to learn how to use your camera. Of course, all of these things are so friggin' important, but the one thing that stood out to me, the answer to this question from me, was actually post-processing. And I'm not sure why I thought some of you might be surprised at that answer. I guess just because it's got nothing to do with the act of taking a photograph. But as far as I'm concerned, post-processing is so incredibly important. I'd probably see it as 40, maybe even 50% of the final image. And I suppose before we move on with this, I'd love to ask that same question to yous. If you could go back to day one, what would you put the majority of your efforts and of your focus into if you could start from scratch? Please comment down below. I think that'll be really interesting. I've just taken some time to get set up here for what is going to be a pretty small panorama really, maybe only 3 or 4 images from right to left. But I think it's going to be pretty nice. The light isn't great down here in the foreground, but I'm hoping that the wonderful golden light that we've got right off in the background down in some of the valleys is going to elevate this composition a little bit. Now, although it's really nice looking down into those valleys, and that's the image that I'm going to be taking, I feel like most of the interest, subject-wise at least, is actually in that direction. We've got black sails up there, swirl how, and actually great cars as well, which is where we're headed. But unfortunately, I just don't feel like there's a composition in that direction. I'll tell you one thing, it's certainly not that cold temperature-wise, but these high winds certainly make it feel a lot colder than what it is. So in terms of the background of this image, I'm of course loving the beautiful warm golden light, but there's a couple of other subjects that I've deliberately included in that area of the image just to try and add a little bit more interest. Firstly, we've got what is quite a small reservoir, probably more towards the mid-ground, but I've purposely tried to place him in between a couple of the rocks that we've got down here in the foreground, almost like a little bit of a jigsaw puzzle. And a little bit further away into the background, we've got what is Little Langdale Tarn, the larger body of water, and he is looking fantastic because he is bathed in some of that lovely warm golden light. Now I'm shooting at 24mm, and of course I've completely leveled out my tripod using the bowl head on my tripod head, and I'm actually shooting this at ISO 250. I've bumped it up ever so slightly just so I can get a shutter speed of 1/100th of a second. And that's just to try and combat against these wind gusts that we're getting, because it's shaking the camera ever so slightly, even though I've got a really sturdy tripod. I'm going to focus on some of these rocks down here in the foreground, and to do that I'll use my LCD screen. I will tap on the area that I want to be in focus, then I will use the OK button to magnify in, and then I'll use the back button, focus button, to finally focus on that area. I said focus quite a lot then, haven't I? But that's it done. And that focal point will stay exactly the same for each image for the panorama. That's really, really important, or else it'll just look naff once you've stitched it together. Now, I can't lie to you, ladies and gents, I would definitely love a little bit of light down here in the foreground. It's all just feeling a little bit flat. But here's the thing, I don't really mind too much. And for one reason, I feel fairly confident and pretty comfortable about my abilities in post-processing. Now, what I mean by that is when I get that raw file into Lightroom and probably into Photoshop as well, I know I can enhance that image somewhat, really bring it to life. And I probably won't even do that much. I guess I'll bring out some of the orange tones of the nice warm light. I'll probably dodge and burn in the foreground a little bit. And I'll lightly darken the sky somewhat as well. Nothing too fancy, but I know I'll probably be able to get it to the point of looking like a decent image. And that is why post-processing was the first thing to pop into my head when I asked myself that question. If I could go back to day one, what would I pile all of my efforts into, all of my energy? I just think it's so important. A raw file, like I always say, is just that, raw information, data. There is still work to be done. Now, that's not to say that I'm going to edit this photograph to the point where it's completely unrecognizable. I mean, as far as I'm concerned as a photographer, that would be daft, because pretty much all the photographs that I take are filmed here on YouTube. So it's not like I can use the new Photoshop generative fill feature and put the Eiffel Tower down there. Because it'd be pretty obvious when it wasn't there in my video. But I think I'll use the same term again. I just feel like I've got the ability to bring some of my raw files to life. And I think that is one hell of a skill. So you're joining me merely seconds after I've spent about 5 minutes on the side of this fell flapping around, and we have got the camera set up for one hell of a spectacle here, let me tell you. We have just got the sun dipping down behind, or just to the left hand side of Scafell Pike, which is the highest point of England. Absolutely stunning. I've had to quickly throw together a composition, really. You can see here we're still on the path. Fortunately, we had some really nice foreground subjects with all of these rocks. They're holding a lot of weight on the left-hand side of this composition, which is just as well, because on the right-hand side we've got a lot of big fells, and of course the sun as well holds a lot of visual weight. You can see hopefully that the camera is in a portrait orientation. We're doing another panorama, only 4 or 5 shots from right to left. And it got me thinking actually about the whole post-processing thing again. I'm actually bracketing each of those 4 or 5 shots for the panorama. And again, it comes back to confidence. I know that I'm going to be able to stitch this panorama together in post-processing. I know I'm going to have everything exposed perfectly. The area where the sun is setting is not going to be overexposed. And for me, it once again reiterates the importance of the know-how of post-processing. Of course, if you're going out and shooting in JPEG and you don't do any post-processing, it doesn't matter. But for me, I shoot in RAW, and having that knowledge and having that comfort. That's the thing that I'm trying to get across. Having that comfort when I'm out on location, that I know when I get these raw files home, I'm going to be able to bring this photograph to life. There you go, I've used that term again. Unreal. I'll tell you something, not much beats it for me. On the side of a fell, nobody around for miles, watching the sun go down. It really is a spectacle, isn't it? Now, stick with me because we're not too far from the summit of Great Cars, and I'm intrigued to see what happens with the clouds. Fingers crossed we get a little bit of colour. I just wanted to stop briefly to say another massive thank you to MPB for kindly sponsoring today's video. I'm so grateful for their support, and if you've never heard of them, MPB is an online platform that you can use to buy or sell used photography or videography equipment. It's a platform that I myself have used for about 3 years now. The main reason I always bought from MPB was actually because they just had such competitive prices for buying used equipment, but they've also got a really good grading system. And one thing that they do is they actually take a photograph of the exact piece of equipment that you're buying, whether it's a camera or a lens or a microphone, anything like that. And like I always say, I just think that's real peace of mind. It shows that they really care about the grading of their products. Now, where MPB really come into their own, in my opinion, is actually selling to them. They will send a courier to your address at a date of your choice, free of charge, to collect whatever you might want to sell to them. All you've got to do is box the product up, and then providing of course everything's all right with the gear that you're selling to them, the money will be in your account in about 3 days. It's something that I've done myself numerous times. Customer service is absolutely brilliant. I highly recommend them. So link in the video description below if you've never heard of them. Definitely go and check them out. Like I always say, if you've just got gear lying around gathering dust, you may as well sell it to them. Get yourself a bit of money for some more gear or to come out on trips. Right, onwards and upwards to Great Cars. I've actually been stopped in my tracks by a beautiful view back towards the north that I kept looking at as I was making my way up to Great Cars, and we have just got the most incredible layers of blue as we go from mountain peak to mountain peak. I guess we are slowly coming into the blue hour now, to be fair. And it's just got Telephoto written all over it. It looks so cool on the back of the camera. It's absolutely my type of photograph. All I've done is pop it into a square crop, f6.3, ISO 64 and 1/5 of a second. I was just going to take it handheld, but I was having to put my ISO up to about 800 because I had such a slow shutter speed, and it just felt a bit daft bringing a big heavy tripod up the side of a fell and not making use of it. So it's been used, and I think this one's going to be a little cracker.
As I ventured towards the summit of Great Cars, the blue hour's magic began to unfold. A surreal atmosphere enveloped the landscape, enticing me in. For this image, some weathered rocks adorned the foreground, and a shimmering river meandered gracefully off into the distance. I framed up yet another panorama and included the majestic Scarfo Range on the right hand side to complete the composition.
Now, it's no secret that on this channel I don't really talk about post-processing that much. The only reason that is because I don't really enjoy making videos indoors in an office environment. I just love being out and about in nature, and I always have. But I was just thinking about this. Probably this probably has to be the main reason as to why, if I could go back to day one, I'd jump straight into post-processing. It's simply just because I love it so much. I really do enjoy post-processing. I know for a lot of people it's a little bit of a chore, but I love having that artistic impression. I love playing around with different styles, and I always have. So that probably has to be the main reason, I think, just because I love it. Now, Great Cars is this big lump here. And you know what? We're well into the blue hour now, and I'm not going to go up. And I don't mind missing out on a Wainwright, because if I just turn my camera around, this landscape is absolutely gorgeous, and I love any sort of fell where you get these kind of craggy foregrounds like we've got here. And basically, to get to my point, I'd have absolutely no problems coming back here. So thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate your support very much. Please comment below, let me know what you would do differently if you could go back to day one. What's the first thing that you would do with your photography? I'll see you on the next adventure. Out!